For 500 years, we have known that the Earth is a sphere. Now recently, VGANG made a video on me, taking a segment I did on a recent London Real episode, where I was talking about the potential of another theory.
What are your thoughts on the flat Earth theory, Mr. Timothy Shieff?
I wanted to watch the video as a sort of roast to myself, an ego check if you will, and to see if VGANG had any insights I'd overlooked to offer me.
Now, I know this is going to sound completely retarded, but just hear me out. You see, the Earth is actually flat.
Now fair enough, VGANG, it was harsh, but the usual VG shtick that we come to expect, and you're entitled to that opinion. I shouldn't have spoken in such a definitive way about something I don't know everything about. I am Tim the Human after all. Forgive me for being human. Some people like to stir things up and gossip about others, whereas I like to stir things up in a more philosophical, flip the world kind of way. Now I'm making this video for my followers and supporters, as I feel I owe it to you to explain such outrageous statements. I've always liked puzzles. I can solve a Rubik's Cube in 24 seconds. I like Sherlock Holmes' way of thinking, and I got into uni, as I said in the London Real interview, to study maths and physics. I like looking and understanding things. Sometime last year, I saw a load of heat being fired at these so-called flat earthers. Now, as a human trying to practice understanding and not judgment, I wanted to see if I could comprehend how people in today's modern age could possibly think such an insane idea. And as Aristotle said, it is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. And I wanted to practice just that. Now, of course the Earth is round, and it's easy to prove, but I wanted to prove it to myself as an adult. I think it's important to recheck beliefs and why we feel them every once in a while. It's the same train of thinking that led me to being a vegan. Now, I love the Earth. As you see in my videos, my vlogs, I'm out swimming in lakes, running in mountains, appreciating the rivers and the oceans, and I took this as an opportunity for me to understand it more fully. But if this topic angers you at all and you feel disgust rising in your belly at just the thought of it, then please close the video now, get on with your life. I don't want to perpetuate your frustration. For those remaining that like critical and independent thinking, science and puzzles, if you will just humour me and follow my train of thought. Now I wanted to go on a journey into my mind and understand what in my head makes me so sure the Earth is a sphere. What's my history? What have I been taught? What things have I learnt myself? What have I observed? Why do I know this to be true? So I came up with 4 identifications. Space, we've been to space of course, we can see the Earth from space. It's a sphere, it's round. 2, science, gravity, all that stuff. How would that work on a flat Earth? 3, geography, surely we just sail off the edge if the Earth was flat. This is going to be easy to prove. 4, observations. What observations can I make? And for me, this is where I want to begin the journey into a simple observation. As Buddha called it, ultimate truths. What are the ultimate truths to me? For you, you may have been to space, you may have circumnavigated the globe vertically, and an ultimate truth to you might be the Earth is round from your own observations. But from my observations, I haven't been to the North, the South Pole, I haven't been to space. So for my ultimate truth, how can I observe the Earth to be a sphere? I've been to the seaside many times, and on a few occasions I remember watching boats disappear into the horizon. This is one of the obvious proofs. I think a lot of people mention this when it comes to disproving flat Earth, and it's very fair to think that way. But when I looked into it, I actually discovered that boats don't actually disappear over the horizon. That's perception due to our limited eyesight. And when you zoom in to a boat on the horizon, you can actually see the boat reappears, and it doesn't disappear in the horizon. You can still see the bottom of the boat. So it's not actually disappearing over the curve, it's just disappearing into the distance. Now, as an avid traveller, I've flown many times, and out of the window of a plane, I always try and get the window seat. There's a good tip for you. Always choose the window seat. Get those beautiful views that none of our ancestors could see. I've seen the curvature of the Earth. Now, not where there's mountains, because of course you can't tell, it's all rocky. Where there's ocean, water always sits flat, right? So you could see the curvature of the Earth. Now, since looking into this and looking again, I couldn't actually see the curvature of the Earth when I found a clear patch of sky, when there's no clouds, over the ocean. Those few occasions I looked out, and it actually would appear to be flat for me, and I put a book up. Couldn't see any notable curvature there. Now, of course, that's only 40,000 feet. Maybe the plane isn't high enough up, but this is just one of the observations that I thought would be obvious to disprove it. Now, I looked online for some amateur balloon footage, because this is something I could do myself, but I haven't got around to doing yet. And there's a video of a balloon going up to 121,000 feet. And again, I couldn't see any curvature on this. But of course, this doesn't prove anything. Maybe 121,000 feet just isn't high enough up for us to see anything, or it could have been edited. Now, another observation to be made is, on the few times I've been to the southern side of the hemisphere, is that the moon is upside down from when you're on the northern side of the hemisphere. Though when I looked into it, I could see it was an oversimplification, and the moon is actually viewed at all 360 degrees of inclination, depending on which part of the Earth you're viewing it from. Another obvious proof is when I look out into the sky and I see the moon, planets, the sun and the stars, they all are spheres. And that would make it incredibly likely that this too is a sphere. Though this is not proof, as I've only lived 28 years of my life on this platform, having never left it, it doesn't make it definitive. Now, just because snooker balls are perfect spheres doesn't mean the table upon which it sat is a sphere as well. Here's a clip of Carl Sagan explaining how Eratosthenes deduced in the 3rd century that the Earth was clearly globular.
But how could it be, Eratosthenes asked, that at the same instant there was no shadow at Syene and a very substantial shadow at Alexandria? The only answer was that the surface of the Earth is curved.
Now, I don't know about you, but for me, that doesn't necessarily prove indefinitely that the Earth is globular. It just shows that the source of light, the sun, was directly above the tower at Syene and not above the other tower. One topic that fascinated me when it came to observations that we can make from Earth was the topic of star trails. Flat Earthers claim that the beautiful trails left across the sky when you take a time-lapse or long-exposure photo are caused by the stars rotating above our heads and that we are in fact stationary. Now, having done some research and looked at how both sides of the discussion perceive it to be, from my perspective, both work. And if you want to do some more research yourself, there's a really cool app you can download called Stellarium, though I won't go into it too much here as we have a lot to cover. Now, one of the proofs VGANG kindly offered that the Earth is a sphere.
Even thousands of years ago, people figured out the Earth was a ball due to lunar eclipses.
Though it's not very well known and doesn't happen very often, a selenelion is when it's possible to see both the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time during a lunar eclipse. Flat Earthers claim this is due to a shadow object, satellite of the sun, passing between it and the moon. Globe Earthers explain this due to atmospheric refraction. Now, I've always been fascinated with the ancient Egyptians, and the way they understood the world wasn't built off the modern technology or the fact that we've got space travel that we now have. They made everything about the world and the Earth off observations they could make from the Earth. And them, along with the Ayurvedic complete cosmology, was based off a flat Earth geocentric model. So for them, it lined up. From this bit of research, along with a whole list of other things that I won't go into now, I've deduced that at least from my perspective, for me, in ultimate truths, I cannot prove the Earth to be spherical or flat. So I'm going to move on to stage 2, and that's geography. Now, geography was one of the big proofs for me that the Earth is clearly a sphere. Surely Christopher Columbus, when sailing to America, risked himself. He could have missed America and gone right off the edge if that's the way they think it was. Now, as I said in the beginning, I want to be understanding and try and comprehend the way they could possibly see the world and get into the mindset. They see the North Pole at the very centre of the world, and that the South Pole is actually a giant 360-degree ring of ice on the outside. Just like that in Game of Thrones, keeping everything in and stopping sailors sailing right off the edge. Others think it's a giant dome, much like that in Truman Show. Now, as a humble human who's lived a mere 28 years of life on this planet, I can laugh and scoff at how ridiculous these claims are, but I've only been around, travelling from country to country, never really too close to the icy climates. I can't say for certain that it's an ultimate truth that this isn't the case. Just like if you had a load of ants in an ant farm in your house, they would see the world as the existence within the ant farm, and they wouldn't know anything exists beyond it. To them, circumnavigation is just flying in a big circle over the Earth. They claim that the sun and the moon are actually a lot smaller and a lot closer to the Earth than we're actually being told. The sun is actually a spotlight, travelling in 24-hour circles above the Earth. And that sunset is when the sun just disappears into the horizon so far that it's no longer visible. And that the moon is actually on a 25-hour cycle above the Earth. And what explains the moon phases is its relation to the sun, as they both travel about in the sky on the 24 and 25-hour cycles. We all know that seasons are created by the tilt of the Earth's axis as it rotates around the sun. For flat earthers though, the seasons are created on their model by the sun rotating down and out around the southern hemidisk above Australia, and that's when they get summer. And then for us, it spirals above and up. That's when we have the summer in the northern hemisphere. Sounds crazy, I know, but in a weird way, it seems kind of beautiful. I woke up one morning with the image of a compass in my head. Now, when I looked into it and how the flat earthers explain the north and south poles, it was actually quite simple, and that they believe the Earth is just a giant ring magnet, with the north being the centre and the southern pole being everything on the outer circumference. Just like the ring magnets you find in your speakers. According to the Pythagorean theorem, that's a tongue twister, try and say that one. Okay, states that the curvature of the Earth is 8 inches per mile squared. But occasionally you get freaks of nature like this, where you can see Toronto from Niagara-on-the-Lake, which is 31 miles away, Chicago from Union Pier, 43 miles away, and Oahu from Kauai, which is 73 miles from coast to coast. This is how the news explains such incidents.
And what you're seeing here is a mirage. So Joshua was on the Lake Michigan shore. He was looking towards the west, and Chicago's beyond the horizon, should not be able to see it. However, with the right conditions, we have an inversion. We have cold air near the cold lake water and some relatively warmer air above it. This will bend the image of that skyline back towards the viewer. And so typically we would not be able to see this. This image would be viewable from much, much higher in the sky, up in space.
Science, of course, has no problem proving the Earth to be a sphere. Now, before we get too sloppy deep-throated modern science, I'd like to remind ourselves of what the late Terence McKenna once stated, and that modern science is based off the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest.
The hard swallow built into science is this business about the Big Bang. This is the notion that the universe, for no reason, sprang from nothing in a single instant. Notice that it is not possible to conceive of something more unlikely or less likely to be believed. I mean, I defy anyone. It's just the limit case for unlikelihood that the universe would spring from nothing in a single instant for no reason.
The Big Bang Theory that was built on Einstein's work and his theory of relativity. I think one of the most obvious scientific proofs debunking the flat Earth, as VGANG so kindly pointed out.
I think before you start jumping off of rooftops, you should know a thing or two about gravity.
Gravity is the glue that holds our solar system together. Gravity pulls on the planets and keeps them in orbit, the same way this rope pulls on this ball.
Now, when it comes to gravity, I think it's a bit more complex than a guy spinning a ball on a string. Bill Nye, though. This reminded me of a TED talk I had seen from Rupert Sheldrake, in which he talked about the 10 dogmas of science, and gravity being one of them, in which big G, or 9.80665 meters per second squared, as we know it in physics, isn't actually a constant and has been known to differ up to 1.3% depending on time and location.
So, well, what if it's really changing? I mean, perhaps it is really changing. And then I looked at how they do it. What happens is they measure it in different labs, they get different values on different days, and then they average them. And then other labs around the world do the same, and they come out usually with a rather different average. And then the International Committee on Metrology meets every 10 years or so and average the ones from labs around the world to come up with the value of big G.
Universe Today is one of the biggest space and astronomy websites on the internet, and this is what they had to say about gravity. Gravity still remains one of the biggest mysteries of physics, and the biggest obstacle to a universal theory that defines the functions of every interaction in the universe accurately. It's important to note that gravity was also built off of Einstein's work and his theory of relativity. The theory of relativity that is taught today, even though many scientists strongly disagree with its validity. Here is what Wal Thornhill from one of my favourite YouTube science channels, the Thunderbolts project, had to say about it.
His iconoclastic papers on relativity would not pass peer review today. In real science, cause and effect cannot be divorced. Ironically, Einstein's postulates stand in the way of understanding gravity, light, and quantum interactions in simple classical terms. In this era of peer censorship, it stifles debate and dissent, which is essential for the advancement of science. It accentuates confirmatory bias. It can halt progress. That's the situation in the 21st century as scientists celebrate 100 years of Einstein's theory of relativity. The simple fact is that his theories make no physical sense.
Looking back on his life at age 70, Einstein gave a clear evaluation of what he believed to be his accomplishments in a personal letter to Professor Solovine, dated 28th of March 1949, and made public many years after his passing. You can imagine that I look back on my life's work with calm satisfaction, but from nearby, it looks quite different. There is not a single concept of which I am convinced that will stand firm, and I feel uncertain whether I am in general on the right track. Now, a man who was alive at the time of Einstein was Nikola Tesla. And when they asked Einstein, how does it feel to be the smartest man alive? He replied, I don't know, ask Tesla. Here is what Tesla had to say when they asked him about Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein's relativity work is a magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. The theory is like a beggar clothed in purple, whom ignorant people take for a king. Its exponents are brilliant men, but they are metaphysicists rather than scientists. So of course this is just one man's opinion. Tesla also stated that the Earth was a realm and not a planet. I'm not trying to discredit Einstein, he certainly offered the world a lot of wisdom. I'm simply offering another prominent perspective from science that we're not often taught. For flat earthers, they claim that gravity would not be necessary, for there would be no force needed to stick to the underside, as wherever we are on the plane, up is the same up, down is the same down, and they say it's density that determines your place in space. They pose the question that if gravity is a constant wherever you are on Earth, and if the Earth is spinning at different rates depending on where you are on the Earth, faster at the equator and slower at the poles, why doesn't all the water rush to the equator, a bit like if you spin a wet tennis ball? According to NASA though, this does happen and the Earth is actually an oblate spheroid.
It's like pear-shaped.
As you can see, science doesn't have the universe all figured out as black and white as some of us so dogmatically believe. What if some modern scientists are just too afraid to look at the universe from a geocentric perspective, for fear of looking unscientific? There's loads of other science you can do to understand how each side of the discussion explains it on their model, such as the Coriolis effect or gyroscopes, but for now I'm going to move on to the final proof that the Earth is a sphere, the fact that we've been to space. Space, or more accurately NASA, was the main topic of conversation when talking about this theory with Brian Rose on the London Real episode. Now once again, forgive me, I want to apologise for my self-assuredness on the matter. I wanted to play devil's advocate and just have some fun. Now in my mind, as Tim the Human, the only person's psyche I can try and understand, this certainty that the Earth is a sphere, what's built this up in my head, what are the building blocks that have created this in my head? One of the biggest blocks in there was an image I'd seen years ago and seen many times since, and you've probably seen it many times since, but I always remember the name of it very clearly. Blue marble. This beautiful blue marble. That's where we are, on that beautiful blue marble. Now in my research, tracking down where this image came from NASA, and it actually came from a guy working for NASA, Robert Simmon. Here's a snippet from an interview with the guy that created blue marble.
Simmon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
Up until that point, there was no realistic color map of the globe anywhere. Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it was a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command-Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
Interestingly, he says here, the last time anyone took a photograph from above low Earth orbit that showed an entire hemisphere was in 1972 during Apollo 17. By 2002, we finally had enough data to make a snapshot of the entire Earth, so we did. The hard part was creating a flat map of the Earth's surface with the 4 months of satellite data. Now I don't know about you, but I find that fascinating to discover that it seems as though we've never actually seen a full, complete image of Earth from space that wasn't stitched together. I guess this explains why it doesn't look pear-shaped. Flat Earthers posed a question to NASA that if the Earth is rotating around the Sun at 67,000 miles per hour, while spiralling around the outer arm of the Milky Way at 500,000 miles an hour, while shooting through the universe at 670 million miles per hour, why do we see the same star trails and star patterns night after night? Now this is simply debunked by the fact that we are just so far away we can't tell the difference. I always find it interesting that there's potentially millions of satellites whizzing around in outer orbit above our heads on some crazy, incredible flight path, not crashing into each other. It is estimated that a single satellite launch can range in cost from a low of about $50 million to a high of about $400 million. Though the Flat Earthers believe that on a Flat Earth model there is no curvature to go around, so satellites would not be necessary. You could do all the sending and receiving of data and triangulating simply with tower masts. Perhaps that explains why I can never get signal in the mountains. Now of course there is the International Space Station, whizzing around above our heads at 17,000 miles per hour. This actually is a feed, supposedly a HD feed from them. I know that would imply some crazy conspiracy, and I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to look at evidence objectively, and at the end of the day, it's still just a 2D image on my computer screen. And from my perspective, the only difference with these 2D images and that from the likes of Interstellar and Gravity is the lack of action. Now, of course, we've been to the moon, the legendary Neil Armstrong being the first man to do so in 1969, though we haven't been back since 1972. Now, if you're interested, you can check out the post-flight press conference with him and the rest of his Apollo 11 team just after they got back to Earth, talking about their experience. Now, if that was me, I would be absolutely buzzing, tripping off life right there, wanting to tell everyone about my story. But these guys, you know, they seem quite introverted, and maybe that's just what it takes to be an astronaut. Now, in the London Real interview, and VGANG picked up on it, I made a joke about the fact that I haven't seen Kim Kardashian yet take a selfie from the moon of her and the Earth. This was just me poking a bit of fun at the fact that technology has come on so far, and yet we haven't been back to the moon in 44 years. Come on, I'm waiting on that commercial space travel, guys. If the Earth really is flat, as these flat earthers so ludicrously claim, why would they lie? Surely that would mean a conspiracy of thousands, if not millions of people in on it. One of the points they make is that NASA gets about $18 billion of taxpayers' money, or 0.5% of the United States federal budget each year. Maybe the wild idea that NASA is lying and the Earth is actually flat is simply born out of frustration. Having visited places like downtown LA and New York City and seen the disparity between the rich and the poor and the way the homeless are treated, I share those same grievances. That's a lot of effort and resources that I personally feel will be much better spent taking care of the suffering people and planet right below our noses. Do I believe the Earth to be round or flat? Truth is, it doesn't matter. What makes a difference in this world is how I act on my beliefs. To most, believing that we came from a Big Bang and now we're on a pressurised ball spinning at 1,000 miles an hour next to the vacuum that is infinite space makes them want to cherish every second and value those they share it with. And to others, if believing that the Earth is completely stationary and that the sun, the moon, the heaven, the stars and the planets all rotate above our heads like a giant baby mobile makes them act more appreciative of the Earth and treat each other more lovingly, then to me, that's what counts. Whether you're a globehead, flat earther, or think the world is held up by 4 elephants and a sea turtle, let's be mindful that each person's belief is based on a unique journey, one that only they have lived in order to see what they currently see and feel what they currently feel. Our ability to be understanding of that journey is what defines our own character. Now who's up for an expedition to Antarctica?